So this month's big clash is almost upon us. This Saturday, Tyson Fury defends his WBC heavyweight championship against Dillian Whyte. This, in my opinion, is a very interesting matchup, and I personally believe that this fight will be a Fight of the Year candidate. So I'm super excited to get into this, but I do have a lot of points I want to make. So enough prelude, let's jump straight in and break this one down. In my opinion, Dillian Whyte has a very decent chance to win this fight. Contrary to popular belief, Whyte isn't just some crude slugger. He's actually quite a decent boxer with a fairly underrated IQ. And I feel like this IQ is reflected clearest in his very sharp ability to catch and counter, which I do believe will pay off well in this fight if he is able to employ it. Tyson Fury at long range he typically relies on his feet for defense, looking to move in and out of range rather than slipping off the center line. He is able to slip off the center line, not necessarily the best technique, so he does rely on his feet quite a bit. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with this. However, it comes with some limitations. And what this means is that when Fury is looking to use his feet, when he's then in range, he's not necessarily the most dynamic target, because even though he's coming closer or going further away, he stays on the center line. And when you look at Fury's offense, especially recently in the Wilder fights, Fury has a tendency to lead with kind of long left hooks to set up a more looping right hand. And for those who don't understand what catching countering is, it's to have your guard up, and as soon as your opponent looks to attack that guard and challenge it with offense, you catch it. And so you block and then you turn straight into your offense. And Dillian Whyte does this particularly well with his left hook. Now, these wide looping shots that Fury looks to set up his offense with, these are an absolute meal ticket for a fighter like Whyte, who's looking to catch and then shoot his own punches. So to remedy this, I reckon his best bet is to keep it straight, keep it direct with his jabs and crosses. And how easy is this going to be? I don't know, because Tyson Fury, he's a long guy and he's got very long arm length and wingspan, and he's a big guy. Maybe he doesn't have necessarily the best coordination, but his best bet is to keep it as straight as possible. You talk about what is the fastest, most direct route to your destination. It's a straight line. So Fury, I think his best bet is to keep it straight and direct with the jabs and crosses. However, Dillian Whyte can combat this also. And you see this if you watch Dillian Whyte fight taller guys, especially in the Robert Helenius fight, which is a few years ago, but I do have a feeling Whyte still has this skill in his locker. He'd edge forward, he'd lean, he'd go to that front foot position where just ever so slightly the majority of his weight is on his lead left leg. And he'd bring his rear glove, so his right glove, in front and then up a little bit. And what he's doing there is he's looking to meet the jab of his opponent and the lead hand of his opponent. And what he'd do is, because he's doing that while simultaneously loading his left side, that loads the left hand. And then he does a pretty decent job of then turning over a lead left cross to counter the jab of a taller opponent. And Dillian Whyte, he does this with a decent amount of quality, as I say, when he's in against a taller opponent. And I feel like this will be something that he will have to employ against Tyson Fury. And this is actually a tactic that Deontay Wilder had success with in the first fight, his first fight with Tyson Fury. And I believe he actually blooded his nose up at certain points in the fight against Tyson Fury. So if I'm advising Dillian Whyte, I say he goes for that kind of tactic to counter the jab of Tyson Fury. However, Whyte, like every fighter, has shortcomings. But his shortcomings stem heavily from his movement quality and his poor biomechanics. His right hand is sorely lacking. This is no secret about Dillian Whyte. And I think it's going to be unlikely that he's able to use it to inflict damage on Fury with that punch in isolation. However, with Dillian Whyte, he's a prolific body puncher. And I feel like he may be able to use the right hand as a follow-through to set up the left hook to the body in particular, especially if Fury looks to kind of rush forward with a low left hand like he has done in the past. Going back to that first Wilder fight, and now I understand the context of that fight. It's maybe not the truest representation of Tyson Fury, but Fury does have a bit of habit to rely on the stepping feint. He'll have his right glove kind of up, he'll have his left hand low or kind of midway, and he'll look to step in. He'll stutter step his way in, make use of that feint. Now, look, it's better than nothing, but in my opinion, that's not the most ideal use of a feint or most ideal form of a feint. And so, potentially, if Dillian Whyte was a more prolific right-hand puncher, like say a Wilder, he could potentially time Fury as he comes in using those stutter step feints. But Whyte doesn't have the best technique on the right hand, but what I mean by follow through is he might be able to just use that right hand, not necessarily to inflict damage, but to just get himself over to the front foot of his stance, loading the left hand and then ripping to the body. And Whyte does have a good ability to go from body to head and head to body. He can double up the hook on the same side. So that's another way he may be able to get to Tyson Fury. I'm not too sure how Tyson Fury is going to deal with body shots, but I think it's fair to say that he probably won't enjoy them. Whyte does get good leverage with his long arms to the body of his opponents, and he enjoys going to the body. His moniker is the body snatcher, and it's something that he does well. So this is something that potentially Whyte could use to set up his left to the body. But when fighting a taller fighter, Whyte's technique lets him down because often he rushes forward into range, usually swinging himself off balance, and this is bad enough because you're wide open, you can get countered, and it doesn't look good. Even if you don't get countered, it's not a good look in the eyes of the judges. But it's made worse by the fact that because of his poor biomechanics, he's now in a very vulnerable position, and he doesn't necessarily have the body control or the positioning to be defensively responsible and return to safety. Now, Fury should look to keep Whyte at that long range and almost force him to rush in if he can. And I believe that if he keeps Whyte at long range, he should then look to move laterally, so in a circular motion around the ring, around Whyte himself, while engaging the hand of Whyte that he's moving towards. And so if you envisage Tyson Fury on the outside, so Dillian Whyte's looking to come towards him, Tyson Fury wants to move to his right, he then he's moving towards Dillian Whyte's left, and therefore he should engage the left hand of Dillian Whyte. So as he's moving towards that hand, keep his lead glove on it. And now I say engage. Engaging that hand, whichever hand it may be, it doesn't mean committed offense. It means using a physical block in front of said hand. And now doing this will physically block, go figure, the offense of Whyte. Because think about if you have a block that's more inward towards you, the shot can already be, your opponent can throw that shot, but then you stop it, you prevent it from landing on the target, which is your head, your body, whatever. Whereas if you extend that block and physically control the gloves of your opponent, you can potentially stop that shot from coming full stop. And you can stop it from your opponent from even throwing it. And I believe that this is something that Fury is going to have to do. And so if Fury is able to do this and put these physical blocks in front of Whyte's potential offense, he then has the potential to maybe force Whyte to make the first move, where he can sometimes be quite clumsy and quite vulnerable. And Fury, for a big man, is very agile. Not necessarily the prettiest, but he's able to get out the way fairly well. And I believe if he can force Dillian Whyte to rush these attempts coming forward, he may be able to get out of the way and essentially make him miss and make him pay, and then carry on his lateral movement. Because Dillian Whyte, he's quite heavy on his feet. In my opinion, he's above the weight that he should be. He should be a lot trimmer, because his current weight seems to affect his coordination, his mobility. Once upon a time, there's video proof, Dillian Whyte was actually he was a much better coordinated fighter and much more mobile fighter. You can see this in his amateur fight against against Anthony Joshua way back in 2009, I believe, but also there was some footage from about 2011, 2012, where Dillian Whyte was super lean, looked very strong, and he was on the pads with his old trainer, Chris Oko, and he looked so much better, so much sharper, so much more coordinated, even though these days he may have a few more wrinkles to his game. And so I think if Fury looks to employ this tactic, it'll be a good way for him to land conservative but meaningful offense. And it sounds a little bit esoteric, conservative but meaningful offense, but Fury, in essence, cannot afford to trade with Whyte at mid-range. Fury's work at that range is just not tight enough to come out on top in that scenario. However, Fury is no stranger to bending the rules and getting physical to shut down a fighter at close range using headlocks and ugly wrestling. A lot of it is illegal. I don't necessarily condone it, but just being objective and observing the facts, it's likely that Fury will look to employ this tactic if he can. And so I don't think Fury should go out looking for big shots. He should look to just land, as I say, these conservative but meaningful shots. Yes, they're still hurtful, but they're not these full-blooded power shots, because Tyson Fury seems to be quite content to actually go out and look for these kind of stoppages and knockouts. And yes, he's done it against Deontay Wilder in the second fight and eventually did it in the third fight, but Deontay Wilder is a lot more limited than Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte has a bit more, he's a bit sharper, he has a bit more boxing craft. He's crafty with the way he sets up his punches. I feel like he's able to adapt a bit better to what his opponents do, and he just has a wider toolkit, a vast array of tools than someone like Deontay Wilder, who's a bit more of a fastball thrower. You know, if you can't keep up with him, you're getting taken out. But Fury has ways of keeping up with him and shutting him down, and I believe that's what Fury's going to have to do. He can't be in mid-range. It's too dangerous. But he can be at long range or at close range, because at close range he's able to tie Whyte up. I believe Fury just has a bit more experience at close range, but then at long range, if he wants to be, he's more mobile and probably has a bit more fluidity and may be able to upset the balance of Dillian Whyte. Now, most objective fans who I've spoken to are giving Whyte a 30 to 40% chance. And for some reason, this causes uproar amongst the Tyson Fury diehards. And I can understand why these people aren't objective. But, you know, I do agree Whyte has a very good chance of beating Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury could very well win or lose this fight in dramatic fashion. I think given the toughness of and the tenacity of both these fighters, I see this fight going long. I'd be very surprised if this fight ends early. I think at some point, Tyson Fury will feel the effects of that catcher-counter left hook from Whyte and touch the canvas. However, Tyson Fury really does have truly remarkable powers of recovery. And unlike the third Wilder fight, he actually seems invested in this fight. I see Whyte having his own success, but I think even though he has his success, he will be taking as good as he gives. And I just don't see Whyte being neat enough. You know, Tyson Fury is no heavyweight Mayweather, but he has that slipperiness. He has that instinct, as I've spoken about ad nauseum. Tyson Fury in the moment is very hard to pin down, whereas Whyte, he's sometimes too sloppy. And I think Tyson Fury is just going to, in those sloppy moments that Whyte has, I think Tyson Fury is just going to be able to get him here and there with a couple of shots. Nothing particularly concussive, but I think it's going to add up over the course of the fight. And it results in an accumulation of damage over the long haul of the fight. Whyte himself has shown a particular vulnerability to uppercuts in recent years. And many people speculate that this is a bit of a side effect of his KO loss to Joshua back in 2015. And they believe that since that fight, Dillian Whyte's punch resistance has pretty much been cracked. I do believe that there is some weight to this. And I predict that the uppercut will be a punch that Fury looks to use during the kind of up-close wrestling, not necessarily pretty, but I think it will be effective. I do think Whyte will be able to hold his own better than Wilder. He's a much bigger man than Wilder. I think on the inside he's a bit more experienced. Wilder really can't do much on the inside and look to avoid that kind of positioning in his fights. But I think despite the size and strength advantages that Whyte will have over Wilder, I do believe Fury is kind of wiry enough and long enough to close down Whyte on the inside. And Whyte can look sloppy at the best of times, and even more so late in a fight. You know, Dillian Whyte's a big man. He's going to be blowing in the later rounds of a fight. Now, Dillian Whyte does have a decent chance of taking Tyson Fury out, but I do have to side with the Gypsy King in this one. I think he's going to secure this fight and win via 10th round stoppage. I don't necessarily... Actually, no, I am fairly confident. I'm fairly confident that Dillian Whyte gets stopped in the 10th round. However, I do see Tyson Fury touching the canvas at least once. I think he's going to get hurt. I think he will touch down, but Tyson Fury really does have remarkable powers of recovery and the instinct and just his in-the-moment fighting and his in-the-moment presence. I do think he's going to come through this one. And most of all, I'm hoping for a great fight. This is such a massive event. Nearly 100,000 people at Wembley Stadium. This is what we need. This is what we deserve as boxing fans. And personally, I've been looking forward to this fight for so long. Even when it was just spoken about, I was just hoping, oh, please, please, please. I just want to see Dillian Whyte versus Tyson Fury. So here's to a great fight, guys. Let me know what you think of my take in the comment section below. I'll get back to you. Do you agree, disagree? Leave it down below. We'll have some good discussions. You guys are, as long as you keep it respectful. I know that some Tyson Fury fanboys are going to come for me sideways like they have done in the past, but hey, it's all fun and games. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'll get back to you. Thank you for tuning in and listening as always, and I'll catch you in the next video.